thank you everybody for joining our webinar today. We've got Dylan Carpenter here with us, who's going to be talking, and we're going to be having a nice discussion about doing, all about PPC and how that works, as well as, getting into a little bit of discussion as well about LinkedIn and Facebook and how that all ties in together with industrial marketing strategies that we put together. One of the things that I'm finding, basically to give you a little bit of background about myself, I've been doing marketing and advertising for industrial manufacturers for over 30 years. Started out doing things with, in the analog world with brochures and catalogs and, trade show booths, etc. And then when the internet came in, we did our first, website back in, I think, 1999 or 2000 for a client. So we've been dealing with this stuff for quite a long time and taking good care of our industrial clients. And now we've moved into, giving them full service, marketing for, and taking care of really much across the board, all of their marketing needs. So that's been pretty cool. We're creating a lot of great results, and I wanted to bring Dylan on here so that who takes care of the PPC work for us and, LinkedIn and Facebook ads for us. So I wanted to bring him on, and Dylan, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Rico. Love this stuff. But yeah, as mentioned, I'm Dylan. I'm a Facebook ad buyer at heart. I started my whole digital marketing journey right out of college, going to work for Facebook as an account manager. So once I was able to kind of gauge and look into thousands of accounts, see how they're spending money and kind of, monetize all these different platforms, piqued my curiosity to kind of go off on my own. I, came across Rico. We've been kind of, collaborating ever since. But yeah, originally a Facebook account manager. Last year alone, I probably managed roughly $10 million in ad spend. We've had quite a few industrial manufacturing clients. We also do a ton of e-com, lead generation, to where when it comes to anything media buying, whether it's Google, PPC, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, we have strategies for everything. And of course, it's never a one size fits all. So of course, more relevant to the industrial manufacturing side, we have some good little strategies and tips for y'all to essentially find those main bottlenecks currently, how to adapt, and essentially what we're seeing across 200 plus accounts from, how ad costs are changing, et cetera there. So kind of happy to dive in here.
All right, great. That sounds good. And, it's nice to hear your background and what's going on. Now in terms of, for the industrial manufacturing world, which is kind of what we're dealing with here, let's kind of give an overview of what paid ads are, how they're best used for industrial manufacturers and job shops, especially in today's, market.
Yeah, and I'll be diving into more of the overall sequence because, of course, across industrial marketing in general, it's a very long conversion cycle. So it takes somebody very long to convert, essentially. So we'll be diving into the remarketing a little bit later. But when it comes to this PPC as a whole, it's a great, platform or just a way to kind of acquire new customers. And this can be across Facebook, LinkedIn, and Google. But for more industrial manufacturing, we see, higher quality leads coming in through from LinkedIn as well as Google. Just because, like normal consumers, people usually shop around for different offers to where they're going to Google to type something in, which, we usually see 74% on average, 74 to 77% of, decision makers are going to Google first to kind of find, the solutions to their problem, essentially. So with these different platforms, some are better than others, without a doubt. It very much depends on the vertical and the niche and industry, of course. But when it comes to, acquiring new customers, of course, starting out word of mouth referrals are great, but those are going to burn out over time. So where once you have some testimonials, some content, some nice solid offers, whenever you can kind of bring these, platforms like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Google together for an omni-channel approach, meaning using them all kind of at once, you can really hit different pockets of different audiences to essentially provide value to where somebody is searching for a current problem, to where you can kind of essentially, hit them with a value proposition to where they're like, oh, maybe I didn't know that, educate them a little bit more. It's a great way to bring in new prospects and leads into your conversion or buyer cycle in a very cost-effective manner there. And it's all digital, which is the best part.
Yeah, which is very cool. And the nice thing is you can track it all. You were talking about a variety of different platforms here. There's Google, there's Bing, there's Yahoo, Of course, there's LinkedIn, Facebook, which primarily would be what most of our customers would use, although we do also, market on Twitter and on Instagram as well. Is there any difference between what's going on with Google versus Bing versus Yahoo? Or is that pretty much all the same?
That's a great question there, and I'm glad you brought it up because with all these different platforms, they have different strategies. So with Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, for example, it's very push oriented, so where we're trying to find them at the right time, at the right place, with the right offer. So where if you show an ad to 100 people, on average, maybe 2 or 3 are going to convert, aka fill out a form on your website or some sort of free consultation around there. With Google, you typically see kind of more pull marketing to where people are actively searching. There's way more intent-based marketing to where if you have 100 clicks, typically 20 or 30 are going to convert there. Now, while those clicks are higher, it's more intent-based because people are actively searching to where on Facebook, we just hope we have a great offer to where it's going to hit the right person, to where it has a lower conversion rate versus Google, to where we typically have different strategies for both of those, just because they are very different tools on acquiring customers with different costs essentially.
Okay, and then now, in terms of the kind of process, give us a kind of a sense of what the overall process is for it, because there's a lot of, there's different. When we're doing PPC ads, that's one way of looking at it, and certainly when you're talking about, LinkedIn, or even, the difference between LinkedIn and Facebook, where you're kind of trying to get them right at the moment that they're about ready to buy. There's different strategies behind that. And so what are some of the things that you see on that level and how to prepare for that?
Yeah, so it's always about testing. This will be across every single platform, to where Google on the PPC side of things, we typically test 50 to 200 keywords, which is a lot. But that's the way to kind of test, because you could have, somebody looking for hand sanitizer fulfillment or raw materials for this kind of criteria, to where it's very specific based on keywords, to where it's very search based. Now with that, you can also target based off demographics, geo target, meaning maybe people only in Texas, maybe company sizes, to where on the keyword side, it's more of kind of finding what the consumer's actively looking for. So you can essentially bid on that keyword, to where if somebody's typing raw materials for this, essentially you're going to be the first one to pop up. The other cool concept behind that is branded and non-branded keywords, to where you can essentially, if you have a competitor, you can, bid on their keywords. Where if somebody, NASA, for example, you could essentially say, hey, NASA raw materials, to where they would want to be the top ones up there. But if you have a high enough bid, you can have your ad showing up above them, to where rather than people seeing NASA immediately, they're going to see your brand, which could be a competitor. So it's really good to kind of have a competitor analysis there and have some good competition, which is typically higher. But then, of course, you may have a very well-known brand where you can bid on your own keywords, like your business name. And typically what we see is we do a lot of our own branded campaigns where it's based on our business, but we also have it for competitor businesses. And the funny part is that, the more notoriety you get, essentially, you'll start noticing competitors bidding for your brand. And it's kind of, interesting to see how it plays out, to where you get to a point like, well, hey, we kind of made it, since you have competitors kind of bidding for your brand when somebody goes to Google there. To where on Facebook, you really have to understand your unique selling propositions a little bit better and those customer pain points, just because you have a very short amount of time to essentially capture that, thumb-stopping, eye-catching moments where you could have a very good engaging graphic or video, where those first 3 seconds are make it or break it, but you want to call it that pain point and your unique selling proposition immediately out of the gate. Just because from what we see on these other platforms that are more visual, like Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, is people look at the image first, then they look at the headline, and then the copy itself. So with our systems in place, we really emphasize on having, a graphic image that calls out the candidate, what that problem is, to where it's like, well, hey, they're kind of speaking in my language, it's very relevant to me, so where you can provide more value in the copy of the ad itself, the call to action to maybe go to the website, visit a blog post, or even, schedule, an inquiry essentially. So they have different concepts with both of them, but it's critical to kind of test, because you're never going to have one ad or one audience or one keyword that's going to knock it out of the park. And of course, like most things, ads, keywords, audiences, they do die off, to where it's never going to last forever. And you need to continuously be testing, because you could find some low-hanging fruit that you maybe didn't necessarily realize. And then the other concept of that is, knowing the analytics. We've had a numerous amount of brands who are like, hey, here's our audience, 45 plus, CMOs, CEOs, decision makers. And once we see some of the data, we see a lot of project managers, UI developers, they're actually kind of getting really intrigued by this, where they can break into another market they may not have understood based on those analytics there. So they are different platforms, but it's really critical to understand the analytics of each one, as well as the testing scenario, because you always really have to test. And the most successful brands, you typically have 2 or 3 campaigns across any platform that are usually doing really good, and then maybe 1 or 2 testing campaigns, because those 2 ones that are doing well may not last forever. So it's good to have a little, keep that wheel running a little bit more.
Got it. So, I mean, you bring up a lot of interesting points, and of course, there's also the issue of the ever-changing platforms. I mean, the way you may have been able to run your ads, say on Facebook or on LinkedIn a year or 2 years ago, because the actual platform itself changed and the metrics that you're allowed to use, et cetera, changed. Of course, you got to keep up with all that and be able to do that. So there's a lot going on with that. Now, in terms of keywords and that kind of a thing, which is, of course, a big thing. It's, I mean, people think about keywords and they think about them just as an individual word, but of course, there's you're dealing more with key phrases today. And now, what's the best way that you've found to come up and find those keywords?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So we have a couple different platforms. One is SEMrush. That's one where you can go, type in a specific keyword and it'll show similar keywords with actual search volume. And then if you do have a current Google AdWords account, they do have a keyword research directory, more or less, where you can type in specific keywords and find relevant, phrases or keywords with cost per clicks around that. So those are the 2 actual systems we use to find new keywords. But another one we actually do is just go to Google, start typing in specific where to find X, and see what Google pulls up. So we can actually see what people are kind of actively searching, to where it's like, hey, where is this restaurant? Where is this nail salon? Where is this dental office? Where Google actually gives you a lot more insights than people would imagine, just from kind of typing stuff in, because Google automatically populates it based on what people are searching there. So if you have it really relevant within your industry, it's a great way to kind of find phrases, because I know one of our Google guys, they were doing some cash for home deals yesterday. So it was cash for homes with a number, cash for FORE. People spell stuff wrong, so we'll even have keyword phrases with misspelled calculations, because surprisingly, a lot of traffic like that, and it's very cost effective there.
Sure.
So it's interesting on these platforms because they do give you a lot of insights there. The only tough part when it comes to those keyword phrases, it's very tough to gauge if it's a very local business. Having something very local for like Houston, Texas, for example, versus nationwide, it may be a little skewed, because on these platforms, they're looking nationwide versus on a more local level. There are some scenarios where you can get more granular, but it's not as accurate from what the estimated projections they're kind of giving you.
Got it. Okay. And now, I mean, have you heard of the there's a Chrome plugin. It's called Keyword. I just had it up here a second ago. Let's see. It's called Keywords Everywhere. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, our Google guys love that one.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. I love that thing. That's great. It's like every single website that you pull up, it just gives you that list of keywords. And of course, it used to be a free thing, and now you got to pay, but it's a nominal fee, and you get so much data out of it, which is fantastic. Now, in terms of walk me through kind of like, what are some of the things that you really need to consider before you even get into doing an ad campaign?
Yeah, that's a great question there. The big ones on the longer lifetime cycles, you have to know what your close rate is. Now, of course, we have a lot of clients who come to us where it's say, hey, we have a referral or word of mouth close rate of 60%. I'm like, hey, that's great, but we need to kind of tone that down a little bit, because if you're doing paid ads, there's no way it's going to be 60%. It's simply probably going to be, I would say, 15 to 20 or even 30% on a high day. So understanding your close rate, how long your conversion cycle is, to where if it's very long, that requires, which I want to dive into later, but it's just too exciting to not now. But understanding, staying top of mind, because if somebody's shopping for you, I guarantee they're shopping for other brands as well. So where if you're able to acquire their info from an email, their phone number, having drip campaigns, stay top of mind and continuously provide value. Plus, you have Google Analytics, the Facebook Pixel, which are third-party tracking platforms that you can retarget within these platforms. So if somebody goes to a website, a specific blog post, you can then retarget them with very relevant material there, just because if it's a longer sales cycle, you want to make sure you hit them from multiple channels, keep that omni-channel approach kind of going, provide value, and let these prospects know, hey, we're going to follow you everywhere. Stay top of mind for when you're ready to kind of pull that trigger. We're going to be the first one you're kind of think to in that scenario.
Right.
So, man, I may have wiggled around that question actually.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. You need to know your market.
Yeah.
You need to know what your niche is. You need to be very specific with your ads. I mean, you can't just say, "Oh, well, we do everything for everybody," because that's not going to work. And you need to really direct people to a proper landing page or somewhere on the web that's going to really relate to whatever the ads are that you put out there. Of course, another thing with creating the ads is there's the visual content. There's of course dealing with the copy and the text, the keywords, and that. But you also brought up another really great point, which was talking about content and drip campaigns and that kind of thing. Because today, it's like the old days. If you're talking to a sales guy, a typical sales guy doesn't go and knock on a door once, and the guy says, "Well, okay, I'm not interested now. Or call me back in a month," and walk away and never talk to him. I mean, it's a constant relationship building, and today with the difficulty of getting in touch with anybody in person, either actual in person or even on the phone, you really need to have these mechanisms in place in your marketing to be able to be always offering good solid content, information, and things that are out there that'll keep attracting your customer to you. And
Oh yeah, and I would even bring up if you're thinking you're kind of identifying yourself in these criterias, with everybody on quarantine, I did a presentation last night to more e-com owners, but very similar style, to where it's never been a better time to develop content because with all these email drips, SMS follow-ups, remarketing campaigns, you need content for that. So there really couldn't be a better time to go to a warehouse, record, hey, we're running out of stock, everything's booming, meet the team, and get some more video content, static images, because people, stock images do something, but there's nothing better than having brand-oriented creative that's, has your text overlay on it, your graphics, to kind of put a face behind the business. So that way, when somebody's doing business with you, they don't think of a giant company that's essentially running it all. They can essentially kind of think of the mom and pop behind it, where it's like they're being affected in this scenario. So where being on quarantine, I mean, it's a great time to get content, build blog posts, maybe an email drip campaign. It's where it's really fun to sit on the couch, start brainstorming some ideas and kind of let them come to life because, we're all in this together. So I mean, there really couldn't be a better time to start developing content.
Yeah, exactly. And now, of course, everybody's sitting at home in front of their computers, so they've got they're actually looking at this stuff a lot more than they have been before. And to your point about, because we're in the manufacturing space, and thank God manufacturing is an essential, essential business that needs to stay open. There's a lot of opportunities, as you said. Take the iPhone, go and talk about your inventories, talk about your production, little things like that you can use to put that together. I mean, we do some of that normally. We do that for our clients in person. We try to go and create photography, video, that kind of a thing that we can put out for our customers. But at this point, that's not possible. So, I've suggested to several of my customers that they go, do some quick video, do a little interview, talk to your employees, and see how they're doing, and send it over to us, and then we can take it from there and distribute it and use it as really good, useful content out there. Another thing I even suggested to my clients was engineering to engineers talking to engineers, because so many of my clients are of course our engineers have engineers working for them, and then of course that's their customer, or the primary source of who they're dealing with. It's like, get your engineers to talk a little bit about some of the things that they're working on or some of the solutions that they're providing for their customer, and go from there. And that's all, of course, great content that can be used for PPC and LinkedIn, etc. So now you were talking about, let's see. Now, I mean, one of the things that, of course, we deal with and one of the things that you brought up with so many different aspects of it, there's a lot of PPC guys doing PPC out there. I mean, it's just kind of the way it is. And we're focusing on industrial manufacturers and job shops. And what are some of the things that, come into play when we're doing ads for our niche versus if you're just dealing with kind of a generalist, PPC guy that just kind of does PPC for anybody and everybody will sign up?
Yeah, it's really coming down to understanding who you're working with, to where you really have to understand who those buyer avatars or target audiences that you can kind of, deliver to your PPC guy essentially. Just because if it's a longer, product cycle essentially, or your conversion cycle in general, you really need to kind of have more nurture campaigns. So rather than going for, the lead out of the gate, which could be mighty expensive for a cold audience, it could be more of a content marketing educational approach that kind of caters to the business. So where it could be to a blog post where you can get somebody there for 10 to 15 cents versus going for the lead immediately, which could be $25 to $30, to where you can kind of cater some ads all the way through that conversion cycle, which will be more cost effective in the long run. So with somebody who's really full into PPC, they're going to be like, hey, we're looking at leads. That's all we kind of wanted the scenario. So we want it immediately. Versus if you have maybe somebody who's more catered to the industrial manufacturing side, they understand the process a little bit more to essentially bring more prospects into your cycle in a cost-effective manner, which from the big picture will overall lower your cost per acquisition, because if they've seen multiple ads, they're educating themselves, they're going to be higher quality, to where from a content marketing approach, meaning, the educational side, you could have, a 30 or 40% kind of close rate versus if you're just getting leads right out of the gate where they're not very educated, it could be a 5 to 6% close rate. So understanding that cycle to kind of go for more of the high value and high ticket audiences and letting them educate themselves is a very efficient way in this scenario. And, even during the whole COVID-19 crisis, some of the trends we're seeing across the industrial manufacturing side has to do with supply chain disruption, which is a really big one. Cybersecurity issues, of course, everything's going digital to where people are, Zoom's getting hacked. I've been reading articles on where as long as you have some safety nets set up, it's just kind of nuts there. Then, of course, the economic recession side of things, and then patent infringement liability. Everybody's looking for, opportunities where it's like, well, hey, most marketing is all 95% the exact same stuff, but it's how you market it. It's where you got to protect yourself in that scenario.
Right.
And then last but not least, with manufacturing, you have a huge workforce typically to where illness is a big issue. I think you can't have more than 10 people in a room now to where you really have to adapt your processes in these scenarios to kind of go with the times there. So there are specific trends we're seeing just because, even for product fulfillment, we're seeing huge issues to where stuff's getting delayed, to where as businesses, they have to adapt their processes to be upfront with the customer, their clients, to be like, hey, it's not business as usual. Here's how we're changing it, and here's how it's going to affect you. So being very upfront about it in that side of things has been going a very long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that, a lot of our clients are, putting a lot of different things in place on the shop floor now with the COVID-19 restrictions and, redoing the way, they're bringing on, 50% of their crew so they can put, 6 to 10 feet in between. Some of them are actually using, using not only rubber gloves, but masks, smocks. My clients that have clean rooms, they're, having their employees on the shop floor that aren't in the clean room, working in some of the clean room garbage to protect themselves. So, it's challenging, and yet these are exactly the kinds of things that so many companies just kind of overlook, but that can be used in their marketing, and especially on their, on the PPC side and the LinkedIn side, et cetera, to help to promote and talk about what they're doing, and say, here, look, see, here's our guys on the shop floor dressed up in, complete, safety wear, so that they're going to be protected, and we take care of our employees. Now, when you're, when we're talking about, budgets and that kind of a thing for PPC, everybody's got a different idea. It sounds like, oddly enough, it used to be that, well, Facebook's great because it's inexpensive to advertise, but it sounds like, based on what you're talking about and what some of the, the changes that have come, and because Facebook is such an immediate kind of market, that you'd actually have to spend a lot more money on Facebook than you would, say, on PPC, which we'll use that term for, Google AdWords, today than you may have had to do a year or 2 years.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I have a couple screenshots I'd be happy to share, but even on, this is, across, so for PPC, for example, we're seeing a lot higher search volume, which is actually lowering the cost per clicks. But even with that, having so much more search volume, that means your conversion rate is going to go down. So during the normal year, if it's 30%, I guarantee right now it's probably 15 to 20%. So it has dropped, but you're also getting more volume there. Same scenario on the Facebook side. Ad costs are substantially cheaper there, but that means conversion rate is down because while more people are at home scrolling, they're not purchasing. And we haven't seen a big decline of purchasing power just yet, but I would imagine as the weeks go by, it's going to. And I'll give you a quick example over here on my end.
All right.
Oh, I think you have screen sharing disabled, actually.
I do?
I believe, yeah, host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Well, then let's see if we can fix that. Let's see. Kim, can you help us with that possibly? Basic.
And if not, no big. I can just kind of give a quick run through of it.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Perfecto. So across 3 accounts we have that are very lead generation oriented. A good example is they're all spending the exact same thing they were spending in February. So we compared February to March and actually gauged how many people are being reached and how many ads are being shown. So across the board, from an account spending $15,000 a month on average, from February to March, they saw a 20% increase in ads being shown with 0 change. So we didn't want to pause anything, let anything happen, just to kind of make sure it kind of flows nicely before we shut everything off. And what we kind of came to a conclusion with is that with more people being at home, these ad costs are substantially cheaper. So in this scenario, we reached 14% more people and 20% more impressions, going from 1.2 million to 1.5 million. So that's with the same budget. It's just with the COVID-19 issues to kind of give a little bit of an example of how these ad costs are going down, meaning you're reaching more people.
Got it.
And yeah, it's the same. I got 3 other screenshots here, but those are a lot more drastic with smaller budgets, say $2,500 a month, to where we've reached 77% more people, 53% more impressions. So it's substantially, we've noticed some trends. We've also noticed some negative trends, but there are some industries and verticals that are kind of doing very well to essentially acquire these customers because, we are focusing on a more audience expansion theory right now, to where if we can get people into our conversion cycle in a cost-effective manner, once this blows over, it's where you can make larger business decisions, maybe with a higher lifetime value. They're ready to convert 3 months down the road to where you can acquire them in a very cost-effective manner right now. So, rather than looking at the revenue super kind of more micro level currently, we are focusing more on getting people into our cycle in a cost-effective manner, whether it's emails, getting them to get a blog post, a webinar, etc., just so you can kind of nurture them because it's really good time just because it's so cheap.
Now in terms of overall budget, I mean, what kind of budgets would you recommend, say, for, if let's say you're just getting started in PPC, what would you recommend for, say, PPC, LinkedIn, Facebook, as a starting point, or at least maybe a window for industrial manufacturers and job shops?
That's a great question. So something I love to look into is the customer lifetime value. So for example, if you have a lifetime value of $20,000 for, one deal essentially, we'll actually kind of let our individuals know, hey, you should be willing to spend 15 to 20% of that to acquire a new customer. So if we're looking at, 20K of an LTV, essentially we'll kind of try and set them up with a budget of about $3,000 to $4,000 a month. So we look at the lifetime value of the customer that they see, and it depends on their margins, of course, because everybody has different overhead cost. But we usually like to see 15 to 20% of that overall lifetime value used to acquire a new customer. And that's a really good kind of test side of things once you have your finances kind of fine-tuned. But if you don't have those numbers and you're not 100% sure, for Google, it's typically more expensive. So I would really recommend about $1,500 minimum. For LinkedIn, I would typically say the same thing. But with Facebook, it is a bit cheaper, where I'd say the base recommendation would be $1,000. But for a more accurate, I usually base it off lifetime value of a customer, so it's more in perspective to the actual business itself.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of a lot of people don't take that into consideration. I mean, with our with our customers, across the board. I mean, in many cases, a customer is worth anywhere from 50 to $1 million,
Oh yeah.
a year in business, depending on what's going on. And so, obviously they have their overhead; those are gross numbers. But so what you're saying, I mean, so in that regard, there's a lot of, and a lot of my customers, they're spending anywhere from $500 to $2,000 a month on PPC, and getting really good results just out of that type of ad spend. So, and when you look at, well, hey, if I can spend $2,000 a month and I can acquire a customer that's going to give me $50,000 or $100,000 worth of business, well, that's really a pretty good value for your dollar right there. And that's actually, and the nice thing is we can actually measure all that stuff and give them the statistics. Now, in terms of in terms of the background of doing the ads, I mean, what's the difference between having somebody who decides, okay, well, I'm going to do my own ads, I'm going to run it, I'm going to figure it all out and do it myself, versus, hiring somebody to take care of, creating the ads, managing the whole program, and setting it up and monitoring it on a regular basis?
Oh, big time. So I mean, you could be wearing too many hats, and you may not just have the expertise there. It's where we've come across a lot of business owners where, like, we've done a couple Google campaigns, it's worked pretty well. And when you go in to kind of see what have been done, it's been very basic, to where it could have been optimized greatly. So where they could have been losing money, kind of doing it themselves, where they're getting maybe some results or maybe none at all. But it's more, hey, I want to try it for myself. But of course, they have other things to kind of focus on. So the other concept of this is, as we mentioned in the beginning of this, is these platforms change very fast. So I mean, a strategy from 3 months ago is not going to work for today, essentially, just because of COVID-19. But same with Google, LinkedIn, Facebook. Things from six months ago just don't work anymore. So when it comes to hiring somebody who knows what they're doing with PPC or Facebook ads, they have a ton of data to kind of feed with. They're testing in other accounts where they're kind of looking at different strategies to implement for other businesses. Because if I'm running ads for one account and I see something working very well, I will 100% kind of test out a similar formula for another account to see if it cracks the code, just because it's never a one size fits all. Right. So the concept of a business owner doing it, they may not be putting enough time into it. They may not understand the platform or how the algorithm works, versus a PPC or Facebook specialist who lives and breathes Facebook ads. They have a lot of data to look into. They can test different scenarios, and they're fully in depth in it, doing, seminars, going to speaker events, 100% based off media buying. So it's more on the skill set side of things, to where if you're a business owner, you should really segment where you are focusing. And it never hurts to kind of hand off a section of the business to kind of focus more on the actual growth, revenue side of things, and those kind of concepts there, if that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, when you really look at the overall scheme of things, the management fees are really not that crazy, to where, I mean, if you hired an employee, you wouldn't be able to hire an employee to manage your PPC for the same price, for the price that it would cost to have us take care of it for you.
Oh, exactly. And then the other concept of that is having an internal employee costs a lot more as well. But when it comes to the cost of a good media buyer, they're getting more and more expensive these days. So where you have somebody who's working directly within your company, they may not be as 100% focused to kind of sharpening their blade a little bit. Right. So where if somebody's 100% doing media buying, you can guarantee they're going to know the newest strategies, the newest updates, the newest grants and loans for businesses to kind of help them in these wild times, where that individual and maybe just be kind of freaking out trying to figure out what's going on, when you have other things to kind of look into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that that we of course experience all the time with our clients and with prospects, etc. With our manufacturing clients, is that these guys are engineers. They're problem solvers. They think they know a lot of different things, and and most of them can understand the concepts. I live, breathe, and eat marketing, and marketing in the industrial realm. I can go into a shop and pretty much tell you, okay, I know how this all works, but I can't run a CNC machine myself. I can't go and deal with a lot of the, the chemistry and and figuring out the formulas. And, when I'm watching the engineers do their thing, I mean, all of these guys within each company have got their specialties, right? And so, and that equates to, okay, well, great, then, let us do what we specialize in, and we can help. And really, and when you've got the professional who really knows what's going on, I mean, and that's the way that I've built my company is, I've got people such as yourself who are really honed in on just that one piece, so that we can actually maximize whatever's going on for the customer, which really helps them out a lot. Now, let's kind of like segue a little bit into metrics, retargeting, remarketing, keyword, all that kind of stuff that we've been talking about here. Let's talk a little bit about the metrics that manufacturers and job shops should be looking at or could be looking at, and what's the difference in the metrics from one platform to the next.
Yeah, so when it comes down to it, on the Google side, for example, the biggest one to look at is cost per click. Just because you don't want to be paying an arm and a leg for a click when you know it's not going to convert. So on the Google side, I do believe cost per click is one of the biggest assets there, as well as what the conversion rate is for specific keywords there, because you can always separate it and say, these are my top 5 keywords, they have a higher conversion rate, maybe a higher cost per click. Mm-hmm. So understanding the conversion rate versus cost per click kind of ratio, I should say, you'll be able to kind of gauge where those next areas of opportunity are, as well as to scale. So for Google, cost per click and conversion rate 100%. On LinkedIn and Facebook, for example, it really depends if you're taking more of a content marketing approach or a direct response approach, meaning educational versus we're going for the lead immediately.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but I mean, from some base metrics, what we like to look at is click-through rate, cost per click, because if you have a low click-through rate, it's basically saying your ad's not doing well enough, so where you need to kind of fine-tune your ad, maybe test a couple variations, maybe a different color image there, and then cost per click stems from that as well. But I feel like it's not as dominant there. It's where we like to look at the click-through rate, because we want to make sure our ad is as relevant as possible to our target audience there. Now, of course, that ties more into the whole back-end side, the conversion rate side of things. But for Facebook and LinkedIn, I do feel like that kind of key metric there to kind of gauge if your ads are successful is the click-through rate. And then, of course, on the back end is how many are converting out of those. Because it's very easy to have a clickbaity ad where it's like, hey, click this for the newest manufacturing techniques, where it's like not much value there. It's where you can kind of cheat the system a little bit, to where it may bring you in lower quality, results essentially. But when it comes down to it, if you have everything kind of to a T with Google, I would look at cost per click and conversion rate. And then on the Facebook side, I would look at click-through rate and the actual bounce rate for the individuals going to your website. Because if you have a 90%, 95% bounce rate, you're hitting the wrong audience. People are bouncing very quick, or it could be a website issue, the site load time. So you have a couple variables to look at, but more for the front end side, I would say click-through rate with Facebook and LinkedIn.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, that's really, that's one thing that we've been able to successfully do is increase the click-through rate, reduce the cost per click for our customers, and get them, more quality leads and things that actually are better suited to their, their customers. Now, in terms of, tracking the ads and, what kind of tracking would you recommend, to track the performance? What tracking should be implemented on the website? Should tracking be implemented other places other than the website? And then what kind of third-party recommendations do you have?
Yeah, so the 2 easiest ones that are free that I always recommend, of course, is Google Analytics. Now, with that, it's a fairly easy code to place on your website, but when it comes to setting specific actions, like maybe somebody going to your contact page, somebody submitting a form, you would need to have maybe a developer go in and set specific goals for that. But it's 100% free for the actual Google Analytics code itself, which is, I think, one of the best ones out there. So that's the big top one. Number 2 would be the Facebook Pixel. This is free as well. This can essentially say, hey, within this campaign, this audience, this creative, you were able to get, 20 people to your landing page, 4 of those went to your contact page, and 1 of those converted to a lead. So where with both these pixels and analytics, you can essentially see start to finish tracking, which is crucial. The other one I see that's very underrated that it is, cost something, is call rel tracking, which is tracking phone calls. So where if somebody goes to your website, they click your phone number, or they put it in manually, you can essentially track that. You can hear the calls go out, to where if we start seeing trends where people are calling and no sales are being made, we can essentially go in, listen to some of those calls, get some feedback, to where it's like, hey, Nancy, your sales rep, they don't have very much enthusiasm, so they're kind of turning off the leads essentially. So I think that's a big one, just because for the media buying side, it's good to generate the leads, but it's also very valuable to kind of see the follow-ups and how the customer sales reps are essentially engaging with these leads you're bringing on, because you want to make sure there's a ton of enthusiasm there. So for the paid side, CallRail is one of the top ones for call tracking. The Facebook Pixel and Google Analytics, which are free, which are pretty seamless to kind of put on, but you can always kind of find a developer on Upwork or Fiverr. It would probably take less than $10 to get it all situated realistically.
Got it. Now, in terms of the, like in terms of LinkedIn and, setting up some of these pixels, I mean, I know that, Facebook's got their code and you put the pixel on various pages on your site. Google's got it. How about LinkedIn?
Yes, LinkedIn does have one as well. It's pretty efficient. I would say it's more similar to the Facebook Pixel,
right,
to where they basically replicated it with just a different code. So it's free as well. It's a very seamless traction there. But the concept behind this all is you can have an omni-channel approach, to where if you're driving, top of funnel, meeting cold audiences from LinkedIn, and you have your Facebook Pixel on there, you can retarget those same high quality leads with Facebook ads. So they all kind of integrate together to bring everybody into one ecosystem, rather than having everybody segmented. And that's how we kind of do it across the board, to where, if we know Facebook's not very good for bringing in higher quality prospects, we'll do it from LinkedIn and Google, and then retarget those individuals on Facebook. Because we can get that data, we can build audiences based off them, and see what the demographics are, to kind of learn a little bit more and, find some more optimization ideas.
And then now, now just to, to educate people in terms of the pixel and placement. Now, does the pixel have to be placed on every single page on your website, just on the home page, and where else? I mean, do you put the pixel on your email campaigns? Do you put your pixel on landing pages?
Yeah, you want it everywhere. Anywhere you want to track, you want it 100%. Yep. Now, within an email is tricky. There are other email analytics tools, like there's one called High Level that I personally like, or Active Campaign or MailChimp, that they'll show you the email metrics for open rate, click rate, etc., which I believe can be shown in Google Analytics, but not within the Facebook or LinkedIn pixel. But if you have, hey, click this link in the email to, check out this new blog we have, they click that link, they're going to a part on your website with the Facebook pixel. So you can essentially gauge, hey, we had a 20% open rate for the email, and we had maybe 70 or 80 visitors from this specific email here going to the landing page. So that's about the only way you can kind of track with an email outside of a normal email platform there. But it's always good to have some sublinks in there going to something more custom, so whoever's going to that page is from the email side of things.
Now, how long should company wait to analyze the performance of their ads after once it's been launched?
Yeah, it really depends on the budget, I would say. Now, with us, for example, we're 100% data oriented, so where we want to make sure enough budget goes in to kind of get an accurate analysis of what the money's doing and what demographics are doing there essentially. So we have some accounts that we have a 7-day window, to where it's like, hey, we gauge how the past 7, 14, 28 days are. But then we have some who do 1 or 2 or 3 days because they have larger budgets. So if you are spending on average, I would say we'll make it easy at $2K a month. I would definitely say you'll want to give campaigns on Facebook and LinkedIn, I would say 10 to 12 days for colder audiences. For Google, it's a little bit more quick. I typically say, 4 to 5 days are a really good indicator, because it's more on the search volume itself. So where on Facebook, you may be testing more variables. So whether it's audiences, creatives, to where on Google, it could just be keywords. So there are different levels there, but I mean, on the Facebook side, I would really say, 10 to 12 days on average for a 2K budget. And then with the same budget on Google, I'd probably say 5 to 6 days to be like, hey, these keywords aren't working. These are working, because, you always kind of over test a little bit, but not where it kind of affects your budget. You want to make sure you have enough budget to essentially test, so you can allocate that budget to what's working. But you need to have that data to essentially optimize these, because you really can't go in and be like, this keyword right here is going to be the cream of the crop. This is it. That's getting all the budget. When in reality, it could be a complete other one doing it, to where this ties into another, a whole other conversation on attribution, So where if somebody sees an ad now and converts 7 days ago, you need to be able to kind of gauge, that actual conversion cycle there.
Mm-hmm.
So attribution's a big one because we have a ton of accounts where people, click on one day and they won't do anything for, 14 or 15 days, to actually convert. So we want to be able to gauge that actual attribution period.
Got it. And now, we're coming to the end here. So, in terms of now, one other quick point that we've been discussing, but we haven't really defined it or anything, is remarketing. Let everybody know, what is remarketing and how does it work, and the different, types that are used, and what's the best use.
Oh, that's my favorite question here. So we talked about tracking, email, analytics, and this all ties into remarketing here. And what remarketing is essentially is, re-engaging warm audiences, people who you have their email, their phone number, they've been to your website, your blog. So you have some sort of their data, so where they've taken one action, so where you can say, hey, we saw you check out this blog page on, how to find raw materials at a good cost or something. So where you can then have a follow-up ad saying, hey, you saw the initial process, check out step 2. So where you can actually have a customer journey alone with remarketing ads. And if you have Facebook, Google, LinkedIn all going, you can do this from all platforms from an omni-channel approach. So with remarketing, it 100% depends on your conversion cycle. But when it comes to industrial marketing or manufacturing in general, it's a very long conversion cycle. So for example, a good example would be, a 7-day campaign, a 14-day campaign, 28-day, 30-day, and 60-day, all within Facebook that have different strategies or goals essentially to educate, provide more value, have a stronger call to action to book a call, and then, hey, last chance to essentially seal this deal. So you want to have a customer journey alone on the retargeting side, because I used to work at Facebook and a couple years ago, and it used to be a lot faster process to get somebody to convert, which was 3 to 5 clicks. That can be, they click an ad, you get their email, they see an email, they click there, they go back to the website. So where it's 5 to clicks to kind of get them to buy something or, get a lead form essentially. Where now it's a 5 to 8 click process, meaning you have to have more follow-ups. You need to nurture these leads, because if you're not nurturing these leads, we guarantee another competitor is doing it, to where you want to stay top of mind, to where once somebody's ready, you're the first one they think of and they're ready to kind of dive in with you. So it's more following them along the conversion cycle and catering relevant ads, because somebody who just went to your website for the first time, they're probably not going to convert immediately unless you kind of provide some more value, versus somebody on day 67 who's really right there to where it's like, hey, last chance, to where you can actually have relevant messaging based on where they're at in the conversion cycle.
Right. Which, that makes perfect sense. So, I mean, so basically you've got these ads that are kind of following you around online, basically, and on blogs and everywhere, wherever, people have ads showing up. It's kind of like the same thing, basically, for in the oversimplification nutshell. It's you go, you make a you go and you're starting to search for cars or whatever online, and then all of a sudden, everywhere you go, the ads for that same car keep popping up, right? Yeah. That's basically what we're talking about, correct?
Exactly. And the other concept behind that is with how Facebook, and LinkedIn come up with their interest targeting is you have your LinkedIn or Facebook pixel on your website, but so do all the other competitors. So where a good example is if, your girlfriend or your wife is looking up eyeshadow or eyelash stuff online, Facebook knows that, so she's going to start getting hit by other brands promoting eyelashes and eyeshadow. So all these platforms know exactly what the website is, what industry it's in. So if you're just doing some curious searches, they're going to be able to put you in a demographic here and essentially have relevant ads for you, which is how the whole targeting method works, because their pixels are everywhere, 100%.
Got it. Okay, and so now I think we want to go into a little Q&A from some of the attendees and see who might have some questions that we could answer. And so we'll see what comes up. But in the meantime, while we're, waiting for some questions, let's see, here we go. Let's change that so we can see stuff. So what's, obviously it sounds to me like, of course, in all this discussions, there's a lot of benefit to having somebody else running this, because there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things things going on. I mean, if we're looking at, because one of the things that we did talk about was, click-through rate and that kind of a thing. And, so is that something that, certainly that is something that really, in my mind at least, that's really what determines the success of your ad, whether they're, and one of the other things is, if you're going to, measure for conversions, for instance, you want to measure for conversions not based on, and maybe in some cases, you might just want to know, well, did they go to the page? Okay, great, they went to the page, that's a conversion. In my mind, if there's a call to action on that page, I want to know that they completed the call to action. So that's the conversion that I want to measure. So maybe the thank you page or whatever, or the registration page that they got after once they signed up. Would that be what you want to do?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Because I mean, of course, you want to make sure, and the cool part about these tracking methods is you can essentially track the landing page, the contact page, and the thank you page, where you can essentially find data and say, hey, people are dropping off on this thank you page. There's got to be a reason why, and you can optimize that essentially. But to kind of more your point, a conversion on these platforms can be the action you want them to take, which can be really anything. But of course, everybody wants to see money coming in, the actual, leads coming through. To where in your scenario, a conversion is, somebody landing on the thank you page, purchasing a product, filling out a form, etc. To where, I know you mentioned click-through rate a little bit, which does kind of vary because it always depends on your offer, how the creative is, because you could have a very one-off image that could just boost the click-through rate heavily, but it could also not yield, high-quality prospects going to your website. But when it comes to the whole conversion mentality around it, you want to make sure your, blog post or landing page has a very strong call to action that takes them to the thank you page and gets their information essentially. But I mean, when it comes down to it, the main converting factor is, of course, from an ad click to getting their, lead information.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. I'm just wondering if there's anything else that we haven't covered here, because we've covered pretty much
a good amount.
I think we've covered pretty much everything that you could think of dealing with, paid ads and that kind of a thing, because it's a big area that provides a lot of benefit to our customers. I mean, one of the big takeaways, at least in my mind, would be, first, before you get into it, make sure your planning is right. Know who your customer is. Know, and basically, essentially, create your customer avatar, so you know what they like. A lot of people aren't thinking about that. They think, oh, well, my customer is whatever their job title is, as opposed to, well, what are their likes and dislikes? Where do they hang out? What's their age range, male, female? There's just so many different data points that go into building a customer avatar. So, those are things. Then also to figure out, okay, well, so you've got your customer avatar. What's your niche? Or maybe in some of these manufacturing cases, they've got multiple niches. So you want to decide, okay, well, out of those multiple niches, what's the problem that we solve best for those niches? And then once you have those two pieces of information, then what? The third piece would be what's the customer lifetime value of the customer, right?
Yeah.
So you've got, now you know what the lifetime value of the customer is, and so knowing what the lifetime value of the customer is, then okay, well, this is how much money that I'm going to put into the pay-per-click campaign to accurately bring in, whatever that type of customer is. And then from there, now that you have all these data points, you can either go down one road, take care of it yourself, and figure out your keywords, do your keyword searches and stuff, or you can hire somebody, give them that information, because we all need that kind of information, either whether we create it ourselves for the customer or whether the customer gives it to us. So that way we can actually provide proper, start to create a proper campaign for them. And then there's all the monitoring, the remarketing, the pixels, etc., that go into the actual campaign, the keywords. But the key takeaway is that there's a lot of behind the scenes work that most people don't ever see that's going on with PPC ads, whether it's Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, any kind of online ads, where you're constantly checking and testing and making and tweaking and refining month after month after month the campaign, so that you can bring down the cost per click, you can maximize the customer's budget, their spend, and of course increase the results. Yep. So I mean, I think that kind of sums it up kind of in a linear nutshell. Is there anything else that you think that I left out?
I think you're spot on. I mean, I definitely don't want to overwhelm too many people here. I can talk about this for hours, so right. It's one of those things.
All right. Well, I think that we're basically, let's see, where are we at? All right. I think we've done our time here. And one thing that I would like to do, and that I want to give to everybody who's on our webinar today, is I want to give them a list of resources, so that, because I know you mentioned a few different both paid and free resources that people can get. So maybe what we'll do is you send those to us, we'll put our own list together, and then we'll compile a list, and then that way, whoever's on the webinar can download that list, and check out those resources on their own.
Oh yeah, I got a couple grants from Facebook, from Google, that are very insightful for businesses that may be struggling, that can get some free money from Facebook and Google. So I got some other goodies. We'll be able to send over some resource guides, so that'll be perfect.
Perfect. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure, Dylan. Thank you so much. And as always, it's a pleasure not only to talk to you, but also to work with you. And we will be talking again soon. Thanks for
Likewise. Thank you.
All right. Great. Take care.
You as well.